Hello everyone, welcome to the channel The Metaphor, and after a long break I have returned to the channel with the book reading, and I would like to have some greeting first. Good afternoon everyone, welcome to welcome to the Metaphor, this is book reading. I'm going to read book that will bring some of motivation and energy. Okay, today I have bring the book called The Power of Now, which is a guide to spiritual enlightenment, and it is also known as the number one New York Times bestseller. And this is written by Eckhart Tolle, and it is one of the best books to come along in the years, every sentence ring with the truth and power. Okay, now let's have introductions. And before the introduction, I'd like to request you all, if you are new to this channel, please like, subscribe, and share this channel. And if you like my reading, please do comment. And if there is any error, please write the issue on the comment box. Okay, now I'd like to start this with the introduction of the book. Introduction. Okay, the book start here like this. The origin of this book. I have little use for the past and rarely think about it. However, I would briefly like to tell you how I came to be a spiritual teacher and how this book came into existence. Until my 30th year, I live in the state of almost continuous anxiety interspersed with period of suicidal depressions. It feels now as if I am talking about some past lifetime or somebody else's life. One night, not long after my 29th birthday, I woke up in the early hours with the feelings of absolute dread. I had woken up with such of feelings many times before, but this time it was more intense than it had ever been. The silence of the night, the vague outlines of the furniture in the dark room, the distant noise of passing train, everyone felt so alien, so hostile, and so utterly meaningless that it created in me a deep loathing of the world. The most loathsome things of all, however, was my own existence. What was the point in the continuing to live with this burden of misery? Why carry on with this continuous struggle? I could feel that a deep longing for alienations, for non-existence, was now becoming much stronger than the instinctive desire to continue to live. I cannot live with myself any longer. This was the thought that kept repeating itself in my mind. Then suddenly I became aware of a peculiar thought it was. Am I one or two? If I cannot live with myself, there must be two of me, the I and the self, that cannot live with. Maybe, I thought, only one of them is real. I was so stunned by this strange realization that my mind stopped. I was fully conscious, but there were no more thoughts. Then I felt drawn into what seemed like a vortex of energy. It was a slow movement at first and then accelerated. I was gripped by an intense fear, and my body started to shake. I heard the word weighs nothing, as if spoken inside my chest. I could feel myself being sucked into a void. It felt as if the void was inside myself rather than outside. Suddenly, there was no more fear, and I let myself fall into that void. I have no recollection of what happened after that. I was I was acco- I was acquainted. I opened by the chirping of bird outside the window. I had never heard such a sound before. My eyes were still closed, and I saw the image of precious diamond. Yes, if a diamond could make a sound, this is what it would be like. I opened my eyes. The first light of dawn was filtering through the curtains. Without any thought, I knew that there is infinity more to light than we realize. That soft luminosity filtering through the curtain was love itself. Tears came into my eyes. I got up and walked around the room. I recognized the room, and yet I know that I had never truly seen it before. Everything was fresh and pristine, as if it had just came into existence. I picked up the things a pencil, an empty bottle, marveling at the beauty and aliveness of it all. That day I walked around the city in the utter amazement at the miracle of life on the earth, as if I had just been born into this world. For the next 5 months I lived in the state of uninterrupted, deep peace and bliss. After that I diminished somewhat in the intensity, or perhaps it just seemed to because it became my natural state. I could still function in the world, although I realized that nothing I ever did could possibly add anything to what I already had. I knew, of course, that something profoundly significant had happened to me, but I didn't understand it at all. It wasn't until several years after I had read spiritual texts and spent time with spiritual teacher, that I realized that what everybody was looking for had already happened to me. I understood that the intense pressure of suffering that night must have forced my consciousness to withdraw from its identifications with the unhappy and deeply fearful self, which is ultimately a fiction of the mind. The withdrawal must have been so complete that this false suffering self immediately collapsed, just as if a plug had been uh, pulled out an inflatable toy. What was left then was my true nature as the ever present I am consciousness in its pure state, prior to identifications with form. Later, I also learned to go into the inner timeless and deathless ring that I had originally perceived as a void and remained fully conscious. I dwelt in the state of such indescribable bliss and scaredness that even the original experience I just described pales in comparison. A time came when, for a while, I was left with nothing on the physical plane. I had no relationship, no job, no home, no socially defined identity. I spent almost 2 years sitting on park bench in a state of most intense joy. But even the most beautiful experience came and go. More fundamental, perhaps, than any experience is the undercurrent of peace that has never left me since then. Sometimes it is very strong, almost palpable, and others can feel it too. At other times it is somewhere in the background, like a distant melody. Later, people would occasionally come up to me and say, "I want what you have. Can you give it to me or show me how to get it?" And I would say, "You have it already. You just can't feel it because your mind is making too much noise." That answer later grew into the book that you are holding in your hand. Before I knew it, I had an external identity again. I had become a spiritual teacher. The next part, the truth that is within you. This book represents the essence of my work as far as it can be conveyed in words with the individuals and the small group of spiritual seekers during the past 10 years in Europe and in North America. In deep love and appreciation, I would like to thank those exceptional people for their courage, their willingness to embrace inner change, their challenging questions, and their readiness to listen. This book would not have came into existence without them. They belong to what is as yet a small but fortunately growing minority of spiritual pioneers, people who are reaching a point where they became capable of breaking out of inherited collective mind patterns that have kept humans in bondage to suffering for eons. I trust this book will find its way to those who are ready for such radical in or transformations and so act as catalyst for it. I also hope that it will reach many others who will find it content worthy of considerations, although they may not be ready to fully live or practice it. It is possible that at a later time, the seed that was sown when reading this book will merge with the seed of enlightenment that each human being carries within, and suddenly that seed will sprout and come alive within them. The book, in its present form, originated often spontaneously in response to the question asked by individuals in seminars, meditations classes, and private counseling sessions, and so I have kept the questions and answer format. I learned and received as much in those classes and sessions as the questionnaires. Some of the questions and answers I wrote down almost verbatim, others as generic, which is to say I combined certain type of questions that were frequently asked into one and extracted the essence from different answers to form a generic answer. Sometimes in the process of writing, an entirely new answer came that was more profound or insightful than anything I had ever altered. Some additional questions were asked by editors so as to provide further clarifications of certain points. You will have that form the first to last page. The dialogues continuously alternate between two different levels. On one level, I draw your attention to what is false in you. I speak of the nature of human unconsciousness and dysfunctions as well as its most common behavioral manifestations, from conflict in relationship to warfares between tribes or nations. Such knowledge is vital for unless you learn to recognize the false as the false, as you not there can be no lasting transformations, and you could always end up being drawn back into illusions and into some form of pain. On this level, I also show you how not to make that which falls in you into help and into a personal problem, for that is how the false perpetuates itself. On another level, I speak of profound transformations of human consciousness, not as a distant future possibility, but available now. No matter who or where you are shown how to free yourself from enslavement to the mind, enter into enlightened state of consciousness and sustain it in everyday life. On this level of the book, the words are not always concerned with information, but often designed to draw you into the new consciousness as you read. Again and again, I endure to take you with me into the timeless state of intense conscious presence in the now, so as to give you the taste of enlightenment. Until you are able to experience what I speak of, you may find this passage somewhat repetitive. As soon as you do, however, I believe you will realize that they contain a great deal of spiritual power, and they may become for you the most rewarding part of the books. Moreover, since every person carries a seed of enlightenment within, I often address myself to knower in you who dwells behind the thinker, the deeper self that immediately recognizes spiritual truth, resonate with it, and gain assurance from it. The pause symbol after certain passages is the suggestion that you may want to stop reading for a moment, become still, and feel and experience the truth of what has been said. There may be other places in the text where you will do this naturally and spontaneously. As you begin reading the book, the meaning of certain words, such as being or presence, may not be entirely clear to you at the first. Thus, read on questions or objections may occasionally come into your mind as you read. They will probably be answered later in the book, or they may turn into irrelevant as you go more deeply into teaching and into yourself. Don't read with the mind only. Watch out for any feelings, response as you read, and sense of recognition from deep within. I cannot tell you any spiritual truth that deep within you don't know already. All I can do is remind you of what you have forgotten, leaving knowledge ancient and yet even new. is then activated and released from within every cell of your body. The mind always wants to categorize and compare, but this book will work better for you if you don't. If you do not attempt to compare its terminology with that of other teachings, otherwise you will probably become confused. I use the words such as mind, happiness, and consciousness in the ways that do not necessarily correlate with the other teaching. Don't get attached to any words. They are only stepping stones to be left behind as quickly as possible. When I occasionally quote the words of Jesus or the Buddha from A Course in Miracle or from other teaching, I do not do so not in order to compare, but to draw your attention to the fact in the essence there is and always has been only one spiritual teaching, although it came in many forms. Some of these forms, such as ancient religions have become so overlaid with extraneous matter that their spiritual essence has become almost completely obscured by it to a large extent. Therefore, their deeper meaning is no longer recognized and their transformative power lost. When I quote from the ancient religious religions or the other teaching, it is to reveal their deeper meaning and by restore their transformative power, particularly for those readers who are followers of these religions or teaching. I say to them in them, there is no need to go elsewhere for the truth. Let me show you how to go more deeply into what you already have. Mostly more, however, I have endured to use terminology that is as neutral as possible in order to reach a wide range of people. This book can be seen as the restatement for our time of that one timeless spiritual teaching, the essence of all religions. It is not derived from the external source, but from the one true source within, so it contains no theory or speak locations. I speak from inner experience, and if at the times I speak forcefully, it is to cut through a heavy layers of mental resistance and to teach that place within you, where you already know, just as I know, and where the truth is recognized when it is hard. There is then a feeling of explanations and highlight and heightened aliveness as something within you say, yes, I know this is true. Okay, now everyone, this is chapter 1. You are not. Okay, now, chapter 1. You are not your mind. The greatest obstacle to enlightenment. Enlightenment, what is that? A beggar had been sitting by the side of a road for over 30 years. One day a stranger walked by. Spare some change, mumbled the beggar, mechanically holding out his old baseball cap. I have nothing to give you, said the stranger. Then he asked, what's that you are sitting on? Nothing, replied the beggar. Just an old box. I have been sitting on it for as long as I can remember. Even looked inside, asked the stranger. No, said the beggar. What's the point? There's nothing in there. Have a look inside, insisted the stranger. The beggar managed to pry open the lid. With the astonishment, disbelief, and elation, he saw the box was filled with gold. I am that stranger who has nothing to give you and who is telling you to look inside. Not inside any box, as in the parable, but somewhere even closer inside yourself. But I am not a beggar, I can hear you say. Those who have not found their true wealth, which is the radiant joy of being and the deep, unshakable peace that came with are the beggar. Even if they have the great material wealth, they are looking outside for a scrap of pleasures or fulfillment, for validation, security, or love, while they have the treasure within that not only includes all those things but is infinitely greater than anything the world can offer. The word enlightenment conjures up the idea of some superhuman accomplishment, and the ego like to keep it that way, but it is simply your natural state of filled oneness with being. It is a state of connectedness with something immeasurable and indestructible, something almost paradoxically is essentially you and it is much greater than you. It is finding your true nature beyond the name and form. The inability to feel this connectedness gives rise to illusions of separations from yourself and from the world around you. You then perceive yourself consciously or unconsciously, as an isolated fragment. Fear arises and the conflict within and without becomes a norm. I love the Buddha's simple definition of enlightenment as the end of suffering. There is nothing superhuman in that, is there? Of course, as a definition, it is incomplete. But what's left when there is no more suffering? The Buddha is silent on that, and his silence implies that you will have to find out for yourself. He uses a negative definition so that mind cannot make it into something to believe in or into a superhuman accomplishment, a goal that is impossible for you to attain. Despite this precaution, the majority of Buddhists still believe that enlightenment is for the Buddha, not for them, at least not in this lifetime. You use the word being. Can you explain what you mean by that? Being is the eternal, ever present one life beyond the myriad form of life that are subject to birth and death. However, being is not only beyond but also death within every form as it innermost, invisible and industriable essence. This means that is accessible to you now as your own deeper self, your true nature, but don't seek to grasp it with your mind. Don't try to understand it. You know it when the mind is still, when you are present, when your attention is fully and intensely in the now. Being can be felt, but it can never be understood mentally. To regain awareness of being and to abide in that state of feeling realization is enlightenment. Next question is, when you say being, are you talking about God? If you are, then why you don't say it? The word God has become empty of meaning through the thousands of years of misuse. I use it sometimes, but I do so sparingly. By misuse, I mean that peoples who have ever even glimpsed the rim of scare, the infinite vastness behind that word, use it with great convictions as if they knew what they are talking about, or they agree against it as if they knew what is that they are denying. This misuse gives rise to absurd belief, assertions, and illogic delusions such as my or our God is the only true God, or your God is false, or Nietzsche's famous statement, God is dead. The word God has become a closed concept. The moment the word is altered, a mental image is created and no longer perhaps of an old man with a white beard, but still a mental representation of someone or something outside you, and yes, almost inevitably a male someone or something. Neither God nor being nor any other word can define or explain ineffable reality behind the word. So the only important question is whether the word is a help or hindrance in enabling you to experience that towards which it points. Does it point beyond itself to that transcendental reality, or does it lend itself too easily to becoming no more than an idea in your head that you believe in, a mental idol? The word being explained nothing but nor does God. Being, however, has the advantage that it is an open concept. It doesn't reduce the infinite invisible to a finite entity. It is impossible to form a mental image of it. Nobody can claim exclusive possession of being. It is your very essence, and it is immediately accessible to you as the feeling of your own presence, the realization I am that is power to I am this or I am that. So it is only a small step from the word being to experience of being. Next question: what is the greatest obstacle to experiencing this reality? Identifications with your mind, which cause through thought to become compulsive. Not to be able to stop thinking is a dreadful afflictions, but we don't realize this because almost everybody is suffering from it, so it is considered normal. This incessant mental noise prevents you from finding the realm of inner stillness that is inseparable from being. It also creates a false mind self that casts shadow of fear and suffering. We will look at all that in more detail later. The philosopher Descartes believed that he had found the most fundamental truth when he made his famous statement, "I think, therefore I am." He had in fact given expression to the most basic error to equate thinking with being and identity with thinking. The compulsive thinker, which means almost everyone, lives in the state of apparent separateness in an insanely complex world of continuous problem and conflict, a world that reflects the ever increasing fragmentations of the mind. Enlightenment is the state of wholeness, of being at one and therefore at peace. At one with the life in its manifested aspects, the world, and as well as with your deepest self and the life unmanifested. At one with being. Enlightenment is not only the end of suffering and of continuous conflict within or without, but also the end of dreadful enslavement to an incessant thinking. What an incredible liberation this is! Identifications with your mind creates an accurate screen of concepts, labels, images, words, judgments, and definitions that blocks all true relationship. It comes between you and yourself, between you and your fellow man and woman, between you and nature, between you and God. It is a screen of thought that creates these illusions of separateness, the illusion that is you and totally separate others. You then forget the essential fact that underneath underneath the label of physical appearance and separate forms, you are one with all that is by forgot. I mean that you can no longer feel this oneness as a self-evident reality. You may believe it to be true, but no longer to know it to be true. Or belief may be comforting only through your own experience. However, does it become liberating? Thinking has become a disease. Disease happens when things get out of balance. For example, there is nothing wrong with a cell dividing and multiplying in the body, but when this process continues in discard of total organism, cells proliferate and we have disease. Note, the mind is a superb instrument if used rightly. Used wrongly, however, it becomes destructive. To put it more accurately, it is not so much that you use your mind wrongly. You usually don't use it at all. It uses you. This is a disease. You believe that you are your mind. This is a delusion. The instrument has taken you over. I don't quite agree. It is true that I do a lot of aimless thinking, like most people, but I can still choose to use my mind to get and accomplish things, and I do that all the time. Just because you can solve a crossword puzzle or the build an atom bomb doesn't mean you use your mind. Just as the dog loves to chew bones and the mind loves to get its teeth into problems, that's why it does crossword puzzles and build atom bombs. You have no interest in others. Let me ask you this: can you be free of your mind whenever you want to? Have you found the off button? You mean stop thinking altogether? No, I cannot expect maybe for a moment or two. Then the mind is using you. You are unconsciously identified with it, so you don't know that you are its slave. It's almost as if you were possessed without knowing it, and so you take the possessing entity to be yourself. The beginning of freedom is the realization that you are not possessing entity, thinker. Knowing this enables you to observe the entity. The moment you start watching the thinker, a higher level of consciousness becomes activated. You then begin to realize that there is a vast realm of intelligence beyond thought that thought is only a tiny aspect of that intelligence. You also realize that all the things that truly matters, beauty, love, creativity, joy, inner peace, arises from beyond the mind. You begin to awaken. Next topic: freeing yourself from your mind. Next question: what exactly do you mean by watching the thinker? When someone goes to the doctor and says, I hear a voice in my head, he or she will most likely to be sent to a psychiatrist. The fact is that in a very similar way, virtually everyone hears a voice or several voices in their head all the time. The involuntary thought process that don't realize you have the power to stop. Continuous monologues or dialogues. You have probably come across mad people in the street, incessantly talking or muttering to themselves. Well, that's not different from what you and all other normal people do. Expect Except that you don't do it out loud. The voice comment, expectations, insults, complaints, likes, dislike, and so on. The voice is not necessarily relevant to the situation you find yourself in at the time. It may be reviving the recent or distant past, or rehearsing or imagining possible future situations. Here it can often imagine the things going wrong and negative outcomes. This is called worry. Sometimes the soundtrack is accompanied by visual images or mental movies. Even if the voice is irrelevant to the situation at hand, it will interpret in terms of the past. This is because the voice belongs to your conditional conditioned mind, which is the result of all your past history as well as of the collective cultural mindset you inherited. So you see and solve the present through the eyes of the past and get totally distorted view of it. It is not uncommon for the voice to be person's one worst enemy. Many people live with a tormentor in their head that continuously attacks and punishes them and drains them of the vital energy. It is a cause of untold misery and unhappiness as well as of disease. The good news is that you can free yourself from your mind. This is only two liberations. You can take the first step right now. Start listening to the voice in your head as often as you can. Pay particular attention to any repetitive thought pattern, those old gramophone records that had been playing in your head perhaps for many years. This is what I mean by watching the thinker, which is another way of saying listen to the voice in your head, be there as a witnessing presence. When you listen to that voice, listen to it impartially. That is to say, do not judge or condemn what you hear, for doing so would mean that same voice has come in again through the back door. You will soon realize there is a voice, and here I am listening to it, watching it. I'm realizing the sense of your own presence is not a thought, it arises from beyond the mind. So when you listen to a thought, you are aware not only of the thought but also yourself as the witness of the thought. A new dimension of consciousness has come in. As you listen to the thought, you feel conscious presence, your deeper self behind or underneath the thought, as it were, the thought that loses its power over you and quickly subside because you are no longer energizing the mind through the identifications with it. This is the beginning of the end of involuntary and compulsive thinking. When a thought subsides, you experience a discontinuity in the mental stream, a gap of no mind. At first, the gaps would be short, a few seconds perhaps, but gradually they became longer. When these gaps occur, you feel a certain stillness and peace inside you. This is the beginning of a natural state of felt oneness with being, which is usually observed by the mind. With a practice, the sense of stillness and peace will deepen. In fact, there is no end of its depth. You will also feel subtle in emanations of joy arising from deep within, the joy of being. It is not a trance-like state, not at all. There is no loss of consciousness here. The opposite is the case. If the price of peace were a lowering of your consciousness and the price of stillness a lack of vitality and alertness, then they would not be worth having. In the state of inner connectedness, you are much more alert, more awake than in the mind identified state. You are fully present. It also raises the vibrational frequency of energy field that gives life to the physical body. As you go more deeply into the realm of no mind, as is sometimes called in the East, you realize the state of pure consciousness. In that state, you feel your own presence with such intensity and such joy that all thinking, all emotions, your physical body, as well as the whole external world, become relatively insignificant in comparison to it. And yet, this is not a selfish but a selfless state. It takes you beyond what you previously thought of as yourself. That presence is essentially you, and at the same time, inconveniently greater than you. What I'm trying to convey here may sound paradoxical or contradictory, but there is no other way that I can express it. Instead of watching the thinker, you can also create a gap in the mind stream simply by directing the focus of your attention into the now. Just become intensely conscious of the present moment. This is the deeply satisfying thing to do. In this way, you draw consciousness away from the mind activity and create a gap of no mind in which you are highly alert and aware but not thinking. This is the essence of meditations. In everyday life, you can practice this by taking any routine activity that normally is only a means to an end and giving it your fullest attention so that it becomes an end in itself. For example, every time you walk up and down the stair in your house or place of work, pay close attention to every step, every momentum, even your breathing. Be totally present. Or when you wash your hand, pay attention to all the sense perception associated with your the activity, the sound and feel of water, the movement of your hand, the scent of the soap, and so on. Or when you get into the car, after you close the door, pause for a few seconds and observe the flow of your breath. Became aware of a silent but powerful sense of presence. There is one certain criterion by which you can measure your success in the practice, the degree of peace that you can feel within. So, the single most vital step on your journey toward enlightenment is this: learn to disidentify from your mind. Every time you create a gap in the stream of mind, the light of your consciousness grows stronger. One day you may catch yourself smiling at the voice in your head as you would smile at the antics of a child. This means that you no longer take the content of your mind all that seriously, all your sense of self doesn't depend on it. Next topic: enlightenment, rising above thought. Next question: isn't thinking essential in order to survive in this world? Your mind is an instrument, a tool. It is there to be used for specific tasks, and when task is completed, you lay it down as it is. I would say 80 to 90% of most people thinking is not only repetitive and useless, but because of dysfunction and often negative natures, most of it is also harmful. Observe your mind, and you will find this too. It causes serious leakage of vital energy. This kind of compulsive thinking is actually an addiction. What characterizes an addiction? Quite simply this: you no longer feel that you have choice to stop. It seems stronger than you. It also gives you a false sense of pleasure that invariably turns into pain.